Hello and welcome back. Here we have part 2 of 3. We're reviewing hands from a $2.20 pot limit Omaha high-low, or Omaha 8 or better as it's also known. Anyway, let's get right into it. Let's see what we've got here. Let's see what the action is. We've got a weak pair of aces. One of them suited though. Okay, we get a free flop. Oh, and we flop the nuts. Now, what we need to do here, unlike, say, regular pot limit Omaha or Hold'em, we need to play this aggressively. The reason being is we currently own 100% of the pot, but if we allow a low draw to come in, they might end up with the low side of the pot. So we need to bet this strong. Let's see what our player does. And he bets the pot. Perfect. Exactly what you need to do to defend against somebody drawing out on the low side of the pot. Anyway, let's move right along. Okay, it's the very next hand. We've got a little connected hand here in the small blind. There's a few limps, so I don't mind a call here. See what happens. Oh, it got raised in the big blind. So we're going to have to call again. Let's think about what that guy in the big blind might be raising with. It's an unusual min raise out of the big blind. Generally, it means some sort of big suited ace with a 2-3 connector, something like that. So anyway, we make the call. All right. Now this is a sort of flop that sends a lot of players broke when they're not used to Omaha high-low, split pot games in general. Sure, we've flopped a set of fours, but our high hand is quite weak. Not only is there already a possible made straight out there and the highest possible set, there's, a flush is going to draw out on us a lot of the time. And remember, on a low board like this, if someone's got ace, deuce, and 2 diamonds, they've already got the nut low. So we can't even try to deny them odds for drawing to a flush. So what we want to do is just basically stay out of trouble. Hopefully, oh well, the pot has been bet. Let's see what the others do. They fold. Generally speaking, until you get proficient at this game, the wisest move here is simply to fold. And it'll prevent us getting into trouble on the turn or the river. Let's see what our player does. Oh well, he made the call. Yes, okay, that didn't help us much. We're in a bit of a tough spot here. It looks like our friend up top has a nut low, or he's certainly got something good to bet into that many people. And don't confuse those small bets on a flop as being weak. They can be a value bet. For example, if I had ace-2 of diamonds, I would make because I'm so far in front of any other hand, including a set, ace-2 of diamonds on that board on the flop is in front of a set. The problem that, in fact, he's still in front of our hand now if he's got ace-2 of diamonds, because he already owns the low side of the pot. That's 50% equity. Then whatever equity he has in a draw, say 20%, adds up to about 70% equity. It's easy for him to be that far in front of us. So let's see what happens. We check. He makes another small bet. He's just begging us to stay in the hand. He wants us in the hand. What does our player do? He calls. He sort of called the flop. Now he has to call the turn. Oh, and the river. Basically, there's really not a lot we can beat now. We'll see what he bets. Okay, he's made a small bet. Our player's got to make a crying call here. We've probably lost both the high and the low. Let's see what happens. He does make the crying call. That's the correct play now, but really, we could have saved a flop bet, a turn bet, and a river bet by simply just folding the flop. I don't usually show results, but okay, so our opponent had a hand slightly different to what I thought. I figured he would have had the nut low to go with it. He didn't. He only had the second nut low, but he drew out on us. So, yeah, when you're in this kind of situation, just fold the flop. Hang on a second. I'll bring up some stats just to show you what I mean. So as you can see here, the sort of range I put our opponent on, without even giving him the diamond draw explicitly, basically had him ahead of us. And Okay, well, we'll just have a look what happens when I put in the sort of flush and nut low draw that I was expecting him to have. See, now if we put the typical hand in, where what we've done now is we're given our opponent the nut flush draw on the flop. With the nut low draw, he was well and truly in front of us on the flop. Now let's see what it would look like on the turn. And as you can see, if our opponent had the range that I'd put him on, we'd still be massively behind on the turn. And it's not that hard to understand. If your opponent already has a lockout on half the pot, in this case the low side with the range I put him on, that means, yeah, you just add his extra drawing equity, and that's why we're behind there. Now let me just try putting in the actual hand he had, and we'll just see what those equities were. So as you can see, when we put our opponent's actual hand in, he was stronger than I thought because he had two aces. And look at that, 61%. Our opponent had 61% equity on the flop. Now I'll just put the turn card in, and you'll see how little difference that makes. Just a moment. And as you can see here, putting the actual hands in on the turn, our player was still well behind, although he did have the odds to call because our opponent was making it cheap. But this just shows you how dangerous it is to play on a board, especially a flop where there's a made low and a flush draw. An opponent with a low draw and a flush draw is generally going to be miles in front of you. Anyway, our opponent, I guess, our player now, he'll see that and he'll realize that should have been a fold on the flop. Anyway, let's move right along. Okay, here we are just a couple of hands later. Let's see what happens. Well, there's a call. We call behind. I don't mind it too much. It's a bit of a loose call. I'd prefer to be on the button with this hand. Obviously, we've only got about the fourth best starting low. Some options there for the high with the ace and the queen and the eight. They're sort of all loosely connected for straights. Let's see what happens. Okay. All right, and we've flopped pretty much absolutely nothing. We've got the second nut low draw, but not much else to go with it. We basically don't want to be putting any more chips into. Oh, and our player has called. That's really a mistake. It's really a mistake to draw to non-nut lows. It's often a mistake to draw to a low-only hand, and this board is also similar to the one we had earlier, where someone with ace-deuce of diamonds, for example, or just ace-deuce, the nut-low draw, and the nut-flush draw is all over us. So that's a bad call. Okay, on the turn, we've bricked the turn. That doesn't help us at all. A pair of ace. There's a bet. We should fold. Oh, and he calls again. That really is a bad call. And the board pairs. Now we've got aces up, so we've got a little bit of equity in the high. Our low is pretty much the worst low. Fortunately, our opponent checks, but really, so we got to the river cheap. Really, that should have been a fold right there on the flop. We really did not have the equity to continue with that hand. Anyway, let's move along. Okay, it's a little while later now in the tournament, and our player's been doing really well. He's got a very nice hand. Let's see. Call, call, call. Now he's going to call. This is a great multi-way. Oh, he's folded. Let's just go back there. This, I don't know. This must have been a misclick from this player because he's been playing hands that are nowhere near as strong as this up to now. So, yeah, this is a great multi-way hand. You've got a suited ace. You've got deuce-3 connectors, so you don't get counterfeited on the low draw very often. The 10 is a little bit weak out there, but at least it does connect the ace, connect to the ace in terms of, making a Broadway straight. So that really should have been a call. I think our player must have misclicked there or something like that. Okay, let's move along. Okay, it's a bit later in the tournament now. We're still doing okay. We've still got a few blinds in our stack there. We've got over 40 blinds just. Let's see what happens. Bunch of limpers. I quite like a call out of the small blind with this hand. It's not a super hand, but it's worth seeing a flop when we've got a suited ace and an ace deuce. See what happens. Okay, well, we're flop top 2, but we're particularly weak on this board. We're flop 3 pair. 3 pair is actually relevant because that gives us 2 extra full house outs. You know, if a 6, 9 or an ace repeats. Of course, most of those full houses aren't particularly strong. Anyway, we really should not be betting out here to try and defend our top 2 pair, because again, with someone with 2, 3 and 2 diamonds for the nut low draw and a flush draw, they've actually got more equity than us in this hand. So really we want to try and get, with this many runners, we just want to try and get to the turn as cheap as we can. He checks. Okay, everyone checks by the looks of it. Okay, fine. Now the turn card. Okay, our hand just got a lot worse. Not only do we have a draw to a fairly weak low, we've got top 2 pair on a board with straights and 2 flush draws. We should fold to any bet here. Let's see what happens. Okay, oh, there's been a bet, a call, and a call, so we should fold. Oh no, our player makes the call. This is a really big mistake. With that many people interested in the pot, you can be guaranteed there are other lows out there already. So, you know, we're trying to play for the high side of the pot. We might already be beaten by a straight, and just because no one raised, that doesn't mean they don't have a straight. If someone's got a hand like 10-8 here, but they don't have a strong low and they don't have a redraw to the flush, then they're going to play this slowly, because there's just so many cards that can come on the river that will really mess their hand up. So just because there's no raise, that does not mean that we're not already crushed. And it's hard to think of, there aren't many river cards we're going to like here. About the only ones we want to see is an ace, 9 or a 6. So this was we don't have the odds for that call. That's a really bad call on such a suited connected board that already has a made low. You've got to remember, in a split pot game, you've got to try and be able to scoop the pot. You've got to play for both sides of the pot. Anyway, this member will see this video. He won't make that mistake again. Let's move along. Okay, it's just a few hands later. Let's see what happens here. Okay, it folds around to us. And 2.5 times raised steal. I don't mind that at all. It's a little bit loose. I prefer to have deuce 3, deuce 4 in my hand with these kind of steals. But still, we'll see what happens. Do we get there? Oh no, we got called. Okay, our opponent checks, so we should c-bet here. Oh, our player checks behind. Now, if you're going to come in with a raise, think about the sort of hands that the big blind is going to defend his blind with. Typically, it's going to have some sort of low in it. And given that no low draw has flopped, we should continuation bet around half the pot, maybe a bit less. That'll be enough. Unless he's got some sort of flush draw or straight draw or combo flush and straight draw, he's going to lay it down. He's not going to have it that often. We bet half the pot, a bit less. If he folds just 1/3 of the time, we've made an instant profit. If he does call, well, our pair of 9s gives us a little bit of equity. We might spike another 9 on the turn, but checking back there, that's a mistake. That's just waiting. That's just inviting your opponent to come out and bet the turn and force you to fold. We represented strength before the flop. We should continue representing strength there. Anyway, let's move along. Okay, it's the very next hand. Let's see what happens. Get some folds. And again, goes for a raise, for a steal. I don't mind this at all because in watching all of the hands through here, the players up the top of the screen, they've not been defending their blinds very much. So even though we're a little bit weak, we do have a suited ace. We've got the 4th best starting low. It's a good hand to steal with. Let's see what happens. Okay, big blind defends. All right, that's an interesting flop. So we've flopped the 2nd nut low draw and the nut flush draw. We've got some straight outs there to go with it. You know, a deuce or a 6 will make us straight. So let's hope our player continuation bets this time. And he does. That's good. Little on the large side, but that's perfectly fine because we've got so much equity. Okay, we get called. And we've made a straight. Now, typically our opponent is going to have called there either with a weak flush draw or some sort of low draw out of the big blind. Doesn't necessarily have ace deuce. So what I would do, I'd go ahead, now that we've got the nut high and the 2nd nut low, I would go ahead and basically, I'm happy to put a lot of chips in at this point. Our opponent checks. Well, that's a good sign. If he had 7-8, say ace deuce 7-8, I'm just trying to think of ways he would have 7-8 to get to the turn. But if he had 7-8 and had made the nut straight, he would bet there to defend against the flush. So we're pretty certain our straight is good. We should just put as many chips in now as we possibly can. Oh, and our player checks, and that's a mistake. That's a mistake. We want to drive out weak lows. Okay, so we've still got that straight. We no longer have the second nut low. See, our opponent checks. Now, often if he did have ace deuce, his low is counterfeited, so we should go and just jam it in a bet pot right here. Oh, our opponent checks behind. Oh, no. And if you look at the low hand our opponent has, he probably would have folded that. If he come and bet pot on the turn or the river, especially the river when that ace counterfeits most low draws. In this case, it didn't, but a big bet there, we possibly could have taken down the whole pot instead of having to split the pot with our opponent. Again, that's another thing about split pot games. Just because you've got one side of the pot, doesn't mean you have to stop fighting for the other side of the pot. Remember, you need to win as much as possible. You need to win both sides of the pot. Anyway, that's the end of part 2. We'll come back soon with part 3 with the end game. Anyway, until then, bye for now.